Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Breacher. Yesterday, we released a tanking video, which was introducing people who maybe have never tanked into tanking and getting them hopefully a little bit of confidence into getting in there and being happy with making some mistakes and realizing that that ain't that bad. So now we're going to move up to some more sort of advanced concepts, but not too advanced. We're going to take this in stages. We're going to be looking at being the control in a group. The tank has a really interesting role, and more so than anything else, like healers or DPS. You are the control of the group. And what I mean by that is you dictate everything that happens in a dungeon. So remember, this isn't about brewmasters or anything else. This is purely about, hey, I want you to understand some concepts of tanking that are going to be really important to you. And plus, we're going to look at being a control. And then in a later video, we're actually going to transfer that into an idea that in raiding that is going to help you immensely with like farm raids and stuff like that. So what do I mean with being the control? As the tank, you dictate everything that goes on in the dungeon, pretty much. You like decide everything that you need to do. So we have a Ninja Pull here. That's fine. We'll just making sure our Iron Skin brews on. We got a nice big DPS Demon Hunter. So, based on that information from what we know yesterday, we're going to turn up the pace of this dungeon pretty much intensely. Remember, we're still playing a very undergeared spec, so we'll take it as and when we find appropriate. But we do control the dungeon. Did he die? I hope he didn't die. Expel Harm! Yeah, they returned it to the game. We dictate the entire pace of the dungeon and what people are going to do in that dungeon. So in doing so, we look at things like, what are people doing, and all that kind of stuff. Like, do we have big dick DPS? We have a Demon Hunter here, relatively reckless, but trying to say, can you go a little bit faster? I'm getting that message, that's fine. I'm okay with it. We will go faster than this, as long as the healer can keep up. It's all good, and I had this conversation on my stream, actually. People were like, would you ever recommend that DPS consistently pull for the tank? No. No, it takes a very, very high level, honestly, of gameplay to know when that is appropriate. I'm going to die. This is going to be funny. No, I didn't die. Excellent. Expel Harm to the rescue. It takes a very high level of play to do that. All I was saying was if some DPSs do pull ahead of you, they might be saying, can you go a little bit faster? That's fine. That's absolutely fine and dandy. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But I wouldn't recommend that the DPSs, like telling DPSs if you feel you're going too slow, that you should just constantly pull forward for the tank, because you might be unaware to a lot of scenarios that are going on. So just be aware of that. It's not something I endorse DPSs to do. Like, you should be pulling for your tank. No, I'm not saying that at all. As the control, we have a lot of power. You do have a lot of power of the tank. And in a heroic like this, it's not going to matter too much. So ninja pulls and stuff aren't going to be a big deal. But once it gets up to Mythic Plus, which we're going to be doing later in the week, we are going to be looking at how you can dictate a hell of a lot of things, including raid markers and all that kind of stuff, to really control what everybody else is doing. Now, I want you to bear in mind, you're having an effect on a significant amount of players. Could you stand further away, really? And that you're having an effect at least on 4 other players in the group, right? I mean, that's something you got to bear in mind. You are doing that. So you need to be able to take responsibility for that without being a smug prick. Obviously, no one likes a tank who's a real smug arsehole about everything. And then making sure you're making good decisions based on all kinds of things. So we know we've got 2 good DPSs in here, which means we can increase our pace. And we also know that our healer is pretty much a slacker, I would say. I mean, he's on like barely any mana used, but I'm still like low health, and so is the rest of the group. So that's something I've got to weigh up in my mind, is how I'm going to control the pace of this group. So with that comes knowing the ins and outs of the instance. So we talked about routing yesterday, like knowing the exact route to take through a dungeon. Now you need to advance that knowledge significantly. You need to know, if you want to be a good tank, what every... Oh, I've never done this dungeon either on my tank. I sound like Mickey Mouse then. You need to know the ins and outs of everything the trash does. So I know I can skip this trash and pull this mob, but I also know that this is a pug. So what am I watching for? Yeah? I'm watching for this trash. How many times have you seen the tank run all the way down there like, well, you're an idiot if you pull that trash? Yeah, maybe so in your mind. But at the same time, are you going to just let them all die? No. So as a good tank, I'm going to wait for everybody to catch up. I'm going to make sure everyone's passed on. Cool. Everyone's here. I'm happy. I'm going. That's the decision-making difference between the tank that charges down here, maybe even pulls these fucking mobs, and then turns around and sees that these guys are like fucking fucked at the back, right? There's a difference there. It's a noticeable difference, and that's something you want to be aware of. I also know that it's not going to be a problem on this level of dungeon at all, but we also know that these jagged disc throws are a fucking nightmare. So Legion, and the reason I wanted to revamp this from the old guys that I did back sort of in Cataclysm, really, for the basic tank stuff, is that Legion has changed things pretty significantly, where tank damage isn't the defining factor of your speed, okay? Whether or not you could survive can pretty much be considered irrelevant in Legion. It's whether or not the fucking group will survive, and often you'll find when you wipe, the tank is the last one standing, despite him having aggro and all that good shit. And the reason for that is a lot of Legion is dictated by what the fucking trash does to everybody else, not you. Blizzard were probably sick and tired of tanks being able to do crazy things. So I know, and I can probably demonstrate this for you now, as much as it's a dick move for me to do. If I pull these 4 mobs, we're probably going to have a death. Right? And it won't be me. It won't be me, but we're probably going to have a death here. And that's something I kind of want to show you guys, unless the DPS is too high for it to be a problem. I'm basing this off the idea that our healers doesn't seem to be the best in my eyes, from just judging from the damage I'm taking. He might be spamming his ass off. I'm a very good negate. So there's one death that we expected to happen. That was my fault, whether you believe it or not. That was totally my fault. I expected that to happen. And we're going to give a sec for a res. Is he going to res? 6 seconds. You understand what I'm saying? Now, that was a perfect little demonstration there. Is I knew before I even pulled that, if I pulled all these things with that healer, that was going to result in a death. And what happened? It ultimately slowed me down. Yeah, it slowed down the pace of the dungeon. That's something you need to bear in mind when you're tanking, right? It's not about how much you can pull. No one fucking cares if you can pull a whole dungeon and survive if all the DPSs are dead, right? No one's going to be like, oh, that was awesome. They're going to say things like, can you not pull so much? Right? A more common thing you'll see in Legion than ever before, when the only reason that was stopping you from pulling everything was pretty much whether or not it would kill you. That's been pretty much since forever. But Legion is more about like this dungeon will fuck you if you do that. Absolutely fuck you. Now, judging on this, I know the healer's probably fine here, so I'm going to pull the boss now. Come on. Come on. Oh my god, do I have taunt? I don't have taunt. Wow, I don't have taunt. So yeah, we've been doing the last 2 dungeons that I filmed without taunt. So that's something to bear in mind. Taunt is an entire video on itself, and the reliance some people have on taunt. I mean, I could talk about it for days. But you'll notice that where I'm spamming now is actually shift 4, where my taunt should be. And there's a reason for that, is I'm not a fan of taunt in general. I think you should learn to play without taunt for the most part. It's useful in some scenarios, obviously. I'm not going to say don't ever use taunt. That's just stupid. But I'm going to say that reliance on taunt for a lot of tanks is a pretty negative effect on your own personal gameplay, in my opinion. So, as we've just seen, this control is a very powerful thing. You're literally going to cause repair bills if you fuck this up. And that's not something you want to do. I'll let the guys decide where we're going to go. This power is something that's going to continue on, and it's going to become more and more obvious when you do things like Mythic Plus and you start, no, did nobody follow it? We're just going to kill random shit and see what happens. Okay. I can kind of get behind that. That's fine. Everyone's like, oh, they're attacking those. It must be those 2. Because the tank did it, right? Because I had the control. Ordinarily, I would say that as the tank, it's your responsibility more than anyone else to make sure you click the right one. But I'm going to take a grace period while I'm recording this. Also watching this mob over here. Very standard for someone to pull it. This is all part of that knowledge. So getting back to the main topic, which was you need to understand everything that the dungeon does. That includes the trash, more so than anything. So if you've not tanked Mythic Plus, or you're just getting into tanking, and you're maybe still in the early... Aha, there we go. See, expected it. I tried to instinctively taunt that then, but I don't have taunt on my bars. I will put it on after this, I promise. I promise. You need to know what every trash pack does, what are the dangers and what are the problems. Now, this extends again into Mythic Plus when we do Mythic Plus, because you might have some affixes in Mythic Plus like bolstering, which means you're not going to be killing the most dangerous mobs straight away. You're not going to be doing that, so you need to know exactly what every piece of trash does. It's called Provoke, right? There it is. Cool. And that's something you really, really fucking need to learn as soon as you do your first dungeon. This is what you're going to do. When you enter your dungeon for the first time, yeah, so it's a new dungeon. So now this is something you will apply to every dungeon going forward. Doesn't matter if WoW releases fucking 12 more expansions after Legion. Doesn't matter. What does the trash do? So as we go to here, we know our worm is going to disappear. There he is. Okay, I'm going to get aggro on this. I don't really care about our Demon Hunter. And then he's going to spawn the Metamorphosis Worm. So yesterday I told you about positioning things in such a way that you can cleave them down. So I'm assuming our Demon Hunter's probably going to run off. Yeah, got that. Should have stunned it. My fault. And that's what I want to talk about as well, is assuming responsibility for things. He didn't pull, actually. I'm surprised that Demon Hunter didn't pull. So I'm going to move down, because there's no worms in this pack, so I'm going to move down here. Going to make sure we're reasonably healthy. We're fine. Move out of that. We know another worm is probably going to spawn sooner or later. Use our lovely little heal there, or expel harm. Ah, there it was. I was expecting that. I was expecting it. Not surprised in the least. There's the worm. We can't stun it. So what we do is, if it wasn't such a mess in here with the extra pulls, is we were maneuvering mobs in order to be like naturally cleaving things down like these worms, yeah? Naturally cleaving them down. People don't really realize they're naturally cleaving down. Again, that's something we talked about yesterday, but it's important that we reiterate that as in the form of knowing everything that the boss does and being able to deal with that scenario. And everything the trash does. Because you must understand that as we get further into the game and you start doing harder and harder content, often the bosses become slightly irrelevant because you put so much focus naturally, okay? This is the important thing to take away here. You put a lot of focus naturally into what the boss does. Because that's the bit you're probably going to spend the most time on. You're likely to kill the trash, right? Unless it's something really weird. You're likely to kill the trash very, very quickly and then spend a lot of time on the boss. And what you're going to do is, by proxy, learn everything that the boss does rather than learn everything that... I'm saying things wrong. You're going to learn everything that the boss does rather than learn everything that the trash does, because you'll eventually clear through it, or healers will naturally heal through it. And then what happens is problems occur, and at that point, you're kind of fucked. You're kind of fucked. So again, this is not a fight I'm happy to have a reasonably weak healer on. He's got half mana. Always checking the healer's mana, by the way. It's a crucial part of being able to tank effectively. That's Spike Tongue. Let's go away. Woo. There we go. He killed it. I wonder if this Demon Hunter's going to get the extra chest. I'd be curious if our Superman Havoc is going to get the extra chest for us. Does not appear so. No. Well, isn't that sad? Isn't that sad? Ah, well, what are we going to do? It's an important job is to understand everything that's going on so you don't do these mistakes that I see all the time when I do random pugs or whatever. I see it constantly is people just not understanding what the trash does. They feel brave and feel bold, especially when you start getting a little bit of gear. People feel really powerful as the tank, and then you'll quickly hit a mark where you're actually causing more problems. Right? I mean, this is this weird synergy that goes on where you get better gear and you feel like, this can't kill me anymore. You're right. It probably can't fucking kill you. It will kill everybody else, though. It will kill everybody else. And this lower platform we're about to hit now is another prime example of that, these mobs here, as these become super, super difficult. Become like absolute nightmares in certain difficulties. I look forward to that. We might even do this dungeon for the Mythic Plus. I think people might benefit from that. Maybe you guys can actually sort of say which one of you are struggling with as a tank. One you want to mock before or something along those lines. I pressed interrupt button. Look at the range of this interrupt. It's so small. It's so small. But either way, we're going to work through this nice and easily, and we'll have some good times. I love this. I absolutely fucking love this. I love that you deal with the situations in such a way, and I don't think many people actually understand just how much the tank can make or break your dungeon experience, right? I mean, people accept it's a role where people get a lot of shit. That's fine. People understand that. But I don't think people really understand just how much difference a tank who is considering these things, like watching the mana pool. See, I'm a little concerned now about the healer's mana going into the boss, right? You see, I'm not getting heals really, but I know probably our Demon Hunter is going to do it. So what I'm going to do is wait just for a second. If they pull, I'm going to tank it. Right? If they pull, I'm going to tank it. But if not, I'm going to wait on this healer. Now, what I'm noticing is the healer's not drinking, so I'm not going to wait anymore, right? Those are the decisions. It took a few seconds to make that decision, and that's the decision we're rocking with. He's not going to tank it, so there you go. What I would like to do here is talk more about walls and the benefit, but this is a bad place to do it now. This used to be a great place to demonstrate the use of walls. So I'll talk about it, but I can't really demonstrate it, but I assume you'll understand. Knowing the routes of the dungeon is fine, but what you also want to be aware of are where are your walls. What you'll find is a lot of mobs knock back, right? Now, knockbacks are annoying, to say the least, right? They're annoying. But more than that, knockbacks actually fuck up DPS because the boss is going to move as it follows you, right? You understand that? So knockbacks are prevalent throughout the game. They really are prevalent throughout the game. God, the range on this is so small. The more I play my Brewmaster, I find these little tiny things that bug me about it compared to like the other tanks, like just bug me that little bit. So, oh, look. Yay, I did all the dungeons. I'm such a baller. Knockbacks are something that reduces DPS as well, so nobody likes them. So traditionally, if you've not seen this boss done in the past, is we used to tank it here, and many other bosses do something similar where they'll knock back, or trash knocks you back. Being aware of your walls means what? If I was knocked back here, now you do slide up this wall and shit now, and it's fucking really annoying, but you get knocked back here, and you don't move. You come straight back into the action. The boss doesn't move either, or the trash won't move, and therefore DPS keeps a consistently high rate. Yeah, that's what you're considering. So one last piece of advice before we start doing some mythics and stuff, and dealing with more difficult things where we have to be more aware of our gameplay, is check your walls all the time. You know the route through the dungeon. I've already told you should be learning what every single piece of trash does, what every cast each mob does, right? Which one's the dangerous one? Which ones aren't dangerous? Which ones can you happily nullify? Which ones are going to hurt you? Which ones do you want help with? Which ones do you want to AoE stun if you see several of them going off? The imps in Court of Stars would be a good example there, as you can AoE stun those on my monk, or I can silence them if I was playing a blood elf, or along those lines. Everyone's got something. I can shockwave them, etc, etc, etc. All these things. But also check your walls. If something knocks you back, right? So you go into a brand new dungeon scenario and something knocks you back, the first thing I want you to think about as a tank is, where the fuck is my wall? I want my wall. So next time I pull this trash, and let's say this trash was here that knocks me back, I would pull it and I would stand, you know, get my ass into a corner, something like an actual corner. You see, like, this is an actual corner, so I don't move too much. Yeah? Things like that is something you want to start picking up as a tank. These are all habits. All good habits. On that note, there's one habit I want to show you that I've been doing, but you probably didn't really tell because I didn't point it out, or other tanks will notice. I was surprised when I played in a guild that a tank came in after I had been tanking and did something that I never thought a seasoned tank would do. I saw him not turn the boss around. A habit that you want to get into as a tank is turning shit around. Why? Melee DPS get a DPS increase from attacking from behind. The likelihood is you're running in first, so the boss was here, right? So if I'm running in first, the melee's behind me. So what I want to do is increase their DPS. So what I'm going to do is pull the mob, the boss, and turn it around. So you'll notice when I pulled this boss is I pulled it to a side like this, because I was aiming it this way for the knockbacks and stuff. No, sorry, buddy. I don't want to do that. And these are all habits you want to get to, is turning the boss around. What you'll find is very rarely there'll be a boss that you don't want to do that to. You don't want to do that to. The golden rule, generally speaking, is never face anything towards the group. There's far more chances in World of Warcraft of things doing something frontal, like a frontal cleave, or a breath, or something along those lines that's going to kill people if you're facing at them. So you think about bosses like Guan, where you want to face it away from the raid because he does his frontal cleave, and then you want to maneuver it back for the breath. These are all things you want to get into the habit to, is if you find a new encounter, when new content does inevitably come into Legion, we know there's new dungeons coming, etc., is to turn it around immediately. Get into the habit of doing that constantly, okay? It's something I do without thinking now, and you guys want to get there too. So I hope that helps out. We're going to move into Mythic next and start getting you some tips in there. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.